Hey guys, it's Amanda. It's time for another reaction, and in the spirit of all things spooky, today I'll be reacting to the top 10 scary British urban legends. I know the UK has tons of them, as many countries do. I just find them so fascinating as they're just passed down through generations and eventually just become common knowledge. But let me know, what's your scariest? What's your favorite or your scariest urban legend that you've ever heard? Let me know in the comments. And remember, if you have any reaction video ideas, please leave them in the comments or head over to my Instagram and you can let me know there.
Hello everyone, I hope you are ready for this. We're going to be looking at some creepy tales again, and this time it's from my homeland of Britain. It's a place with a lot of history dating back thousands of years, so it makes sense that there would be a lot of scary stories attached to certain places. Which one of these will send a shiver down your spine? Let's find out. My name is Danny Burke and this is the top 10 scary British urban legends. Starting off at number 10 now, we have the corpse train. Now according to London folklore, in the early 1900s there was a train that ran underneath the city and it was only for dead people. Back then, London's hospitals and morgues were struggling to deal with the vast amount of people that were dying from poverty and disease. They decided to transport the bodies out of the city, but knew that they couldn't do it overground without disturbing a lot of people. So they used an existing train line to load the bodies onto. The train ran just the other side of a wall from the normal daily service, where unsuspecting Londoners were getting on and off their trains unaware of the nearby bodies. Next up at number 9 now, we have the...
Well, that sounds absolutely terrifying. It's a good thing there's a wall so people didn't know what was going on. I mean, could you imagine being the one to have to drive that train? No, thank you.
Suicide pool. This one comes from Epping Forest near Essex. The story goes that years ago a young couple in love were followed to a pond in the forest by the girl's father. When the couple finally embraced, the father leapt from the trees to confront the boy. The fight got out of hand and the father ended up killing the boy in a rage at the edge of the pool. The waters then turned black. Wildlife that was touching the water died instantly. In the years that followed, bodies started to appear in the water. First it was an old woman, then a young one with her young child beside her. They say the pool drew them into their death and that the pool is still out there in the forest somewhere waiting for its next victim. Next up at number 8 now, we have Annie. This one comes from Edinburgh, Scotland. In the old town there lies a street known as Mary King's Close. It's steeped in myths and legends of hauntings and murders. In 1990, a psychic called Aiko Gibo visited and felt a small hand touch hers. She said that she then made contact with the spirit of a dead child called Annie who had died in a plague hundreds of years ago and had lost her doll. The psychic then went to a nearby shop and brought back a Barbie doll for her. Now since then, visitors leave dolls for Annie and a mountain of them has built up in the dark. Moving on to number 7 now.
I have heard quite a few stories about that though, like she pulls hair and all sorts because she just wants to play with everybody. Now, I don't know how true that is, but it makes for a great spooky story.
On to number 7 now, we have the Faceless Woman. This one comes from the borough of Barking in London. There you can find Beacon Tree Station, home to the Faceless Woman. The most famous sighting of her happened in 1992. A station supervisor reported that on one night he heard the handle of his office door rattle. Outside on the platform stood a woman. She had blonde hair, she wore a very pale dress and just stared into the distance. The supervisor approached her, but as he reached out, she turned to him only to reveal she had no face, just darkness where there should be one. Local ghost hunters claim that she is the victim of a train crash that happened there in 1958 which killed 10 people. At number 6 now.
I'll remember to stay clear of that station.
Now we have the Beast. England's Hackney Marshes is known for its sprawling woodland and boggy reed marshes often covered in swirling fog, the perfect setting for this urban legend. The story goes that in 1980, 2 bear carcasses were found in the river. They had been decapitated. People started speculating about who or what could cut a bear's head clean off its shoulders. Then a year later, 4 boys were taking a walk along the marsh one winter morning when they saw it through the trees. They described it as a giant, great, growling, hairy thing. As soon as it saw them, it reared up on its back legs and let out a deafening roar. The boys ran, but the story remains always in the back of people's minds as they trudge through the marsh. We're returning now to the London Underground for an...
That one just seems a little bit silly to me, I have to be honest. I mean, it sounds like the boys just saw a bear. I mean, don't you think?
Number 5 with The Crying Girl. On November 18th, 1987, a match was dropped on an escalator at London's King Cross station. A fire quickly spread into the nearby ticket office, which resulted in the death of 31 people. In the years since then, passengers have reported seeing a girl who died around the station. She has long brown hair, wears jeans and a t-shirt, and is always crying. Some people have even reported hearing her sobs while smelling smoke coming out from the escalators. Back to Scotland now for our number 4 with
That's so sad. I mean, is it just me, or does there seem to be a lot of urban legends around London and the tube stations? They're definitely not places that you'd want to go alone at night for any reason, like ever.
Thorny Bean. This is the gruesome tale of Alexander Thorny Bean, a man who was said to be the head of a Scottish clan of cannibals in medieval times. According to legend, the group was made up of his wife, their 14 children and 32 grandchildren, some of whom were born through incest. They lived in a cave by the water and would ambush people on the road at night. They would bring their bodies back to the cave to then dismember and eat them. Any leftovers were pickled in a jar for later. When King James VI of Scotland eventually heard of these murders, he led a manhunt to capture them. The clan was caught and then executed. Some people say you can still find the cave along the Benane Head area of Scotland. Moving on to number 3 now, we have Kane Hill.
Holy moly, they are busy. That is a lot of children and grandchildren. On a serious note though, how terrifying is that? You definitely would not want to run into that group. Now, I feel like this one is probably the scariest so far because it could easily happen today, as it isn't like supernatural or anything. I mean, it's just people eating people. Completely normal.
Kane Hill. Some say this is one of the most haunted places in England. It was a mental asylum for over 100 years from 1882 to 1991. It built up a reputation for abandoning some of its patients, hiding them away from the public eye and never truly helping them. Some people say the patients who died left their energy behind there because of their tortured lives. The building was gutted by a mysterious fire in 2010. Perhaps the scariest stories of all are of the faces appearing by the burnt out windows. Next up at number 2 now, we have the House of the Screaming.
There's just something about mental institutions that I just find terrifying. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's in the States. There's ones that you can actually visit and even like stay the night, but you have to sign waivers so that if anything happens to you, they're not liable. I mean, who would do that? Not me. But regardless of whether anything could or would actually happen, you definitely could not pay me enough money to do that.
Skull. This one comes from Bettiscombe Manor in Dorset, England. The legend goes that in 1830, a man lived there called John Frederick Pinney. He had a slave that he had brought back from the Caribbean island of Nevis. The man became ill, and on his deathbed, he swore he would never rest unless his body was returned home to Nevis. Pinney refused to pay for that expense, and when he died, he had the man buried in the local graveyard. After that, ill fortune began to plague the village for months. Screams and cries were heard from the cemetery. At the manor house, windows rattled and doors kept slamming. The body was dug up and brought to the manor house, where today only the skull remains, where it's said to haunt the manor, but the village remains safe. And finally, number 1 now, we have the Hellhounds. Dartmoor is a vast, rocky, windy and mysterious part of England. It's popular among tourists, but everyone who goes there is aware of the legend of the Hellhounds. It's said that a pack of these ghost dogs wanders the moors at night, preying on sheep, and they're not afraid of humans. They've often been described as cat-like, but with the frame of a bear and very fast. There have been pictures and film taken of them over the years that claim to show glimpses of these hellhounds in action. Many of the locals don't even need that though. They've heard the stories handed down from generation to generation. Some of them even say they've seen the hounds with their own 2 eyes.
Have any of you ever watched Supernatural? Because that is all I could think about as soon as he said Hellhounds. It's such a good show. It's all about the supernatural, where they fight demons and ghosts. You name it, I'm sure it's been on there. So if you haven't seen it, you need to. To be honest, the creepiest ones for me was probably Kane Hill or Thorny Bean. But I love hearing about urban legends, as there's almost always a great story and history attached to it. And like I said before, they're just passed down through the generations, and they're super spooky. Whether you believe them or not, they're just fun. But what are your thoughts? Are there any urban legends that you believe to be true, or do you have any that you would like to share? please leave them in the comments because I know there is so many more out there and I want to hear the spookiest, scariest one ever. So let me know. And as always, if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel, smash that like button if that's what you're into, and I'll see you in the next video.